The boardroom was tense, the kind of tense that made time feel like it had stopped breathing. 12 executives sat stiffly around a glass table, their eyes darting between the CEO and the foreign investor, who now looked visibly irritated. The translator, who was supposed to be the bridge between cultures and millions, had failed to show up. The CEO's voice trembled as he stumbled through a scripted greeting in broken Mandarin, each mispronounced word drawing a sharper wince from the investor. Millions were on the line. Years of negotiation, planning, and late-night strategy sessions were unraveling right in front of them. Behind them, unnoticed, a janitor mopped the marble floors with quiet efficiency, and just beyond him stood his teenage daughter holding a lunchbox in one hand and a worn backpack in the other. She watched, her brows furrowed, understanding every word the CEO was butchering. Then, with a calm boldness that silenced the chaos, she stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said clearly, her voice cutting through the thick tension. "I can translate." Heads turned in disbelief. The room fell into dead silence. And in that moment, the entire future of the company rested in the hands of a girl no one had even noticed until now. 3 weeks earlier, the world inside Lexford and Hayes Global moved with clockwork precision. High heels clicking across polished marble floors, lattes brewed with machine accuracy, and executives glued to their dual-monitor setups. The company was a well-oiled machine, or at least that's how the CEO, Andrew Lexford, liked to believe it. To him, success was earned through speed, ruthlessness, and appearances. Tall, sharply dressed, and always on the move, Andrew ran his company like a battleground. If you hesitated, you were left behind. If you failed him, you didn't get a second chance. But beneath the gleaming surface of Lexford Tower, far from the glassy boardrooms and top-floor suites, was a different rhythm, a quieter, humbler world that no one paid much attention to. That was where Thomas Reed worked, the janitor, a black man in his late 50s with calloused hands and a permanent ache in his lower back. Thomas had worked the night shift for nearly a decade. He arrived before sunrise and left long after most had gone home. No one really spoke to him unless there was a spill to clean or a light bulb to change. He didn't mind. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there to provide. Every morning, his daughter, Maya, waited at the back of the building with her father's breakfast and her books. She was 17, smart and observant, with sharp eyes that didn't miss much, especially in a world that so often tried to ignore her. Her skin was the color of coffee, her hair pulled into a neat bun, and her backpack always filled with notebooks, earbuds, and old library books about language and world politics. She wasn't enrolled in any private school, nor did she have tutors like the executive's children did. Her education came from hours spent at the public library, free YouTube lectures, and secondhand textbooks her dad found at charity stores. She soaked up knowledge like a sponge and translated it into quiet confidence. Most people at the company had no idea who Maya was. A few assumed she was some staff kid visiting on weekends. Once, she lingered in the hallway near the marketing division, listening to a branding pitch in 3 languages. An assistant frowned at her and said, "You shouldn't be back here." Maya apologized and walked away without a word. But later she wrote down everything she heard and researched the phrases in Mandarin and French. No, one realized she was teaching herself 4 languages, not for school, but for something she couldn't even fully name yet. She just wanted to be ready for whatever came. Meanwhile, Andrew Lexford was prepping for the biggest deal of his career. He had been chasing the Shenzhen Consortium, a Chinese tech group worth billions, for almost a year. This wasn't just another contract. It was a potential lifeline. Lexford and Hayes had been bleeding clients due to an outdated platform and some bad press. If this deal went through, they could rebrand, rebuild, and relaunch globally. But it had to be perfect. No mistakes. Andrew had already paid for a high-end translator, a cultural consultant, and even rehearsed phrases in Mandarin to impress the investors. His team was exhausted from 14-hour days. Tension hung in the air like storm clouds. What Andrew didn't know, and likely wouldn't have cared to know, was that the janitor cleaning outside his office was a former literature teacher who gave up everything when his wife passed away. or that Thomas had raised Maya alone, scrubbing floors at night and working odd jobs on weekends to keep food on the table, or that the janitor's kid had once corrected a college student's Mandarin in the library and had been right. In the grand world of power suits, million-dollar slideshows, and branded coffee mugs, people like Thomas and Maya were invisible. But that was about to change. On the 15th floor of Lexford Tower, people walked fast and looked forward, not around, and certainly never down. They didn't notice Maya Reed, even when she passed them in the hallway. She was like background noise to them, the quiet hum of an air conditioner, the shuffle of papers, the forgotten presence that kept the building running while they chased power meetings and KPI reports. To most of them, she was just the janitor's kid, loitering after hours or tagging along on her dad's shift. What no one noticed was that every step she took was calculated, every glance soaking in knowledge, every moment memorized like a silent observer collecting data for something far beyond her years. Maya had her own private education system. While the executives spent their lunch breaks at rooftop cafes, she sat cross-legged on a crate near the janitor's locker room, her earbuds in, eyes fixed on her phone screen. Not for TikToks or gossip, but for university lectures in Mandarin, free language breakdowns from native speakers, and business terminology videos most high schoolers would find exhausting. She paused and rewound repeatedly, mouthing each word until her pronunciation matched. When her dad came to check on her, she'd smile and ask him questions. Some he understood, some that made him raise his eyebrows in confusion and pride. "You're going to own a building like this one day," he said once, handing her a sandwich. She smirked. "I'll design my own." With a library on every floor. Upstairs, a Lexford leadership team was in no mood to notice brilliance unless it came wrapped in a resume from Yale or delivered by someone with a six-figure salary. Elaine Carrington, the COO, brushed past Maya one morning without even looking at her face. "Excuse me, sweetie, this area is restricted," she said flatly, as Maya stood quietly by the vending machine near the conference room. Maya nodded, murmured sorry, and turned, but she wasn't loitering. She had been listening to a conversation between two managers trying to decode an email from the Chinese investor's assistant. They misunderstood the phrasing, a subtle idiom, and laughed it off. Maya frowned. She knew exactly what the email meant. But of course, no one was going to ask her. In another moment, days later, Maya was in the stairwell, hunched over her notebook. She was sketching out business vocabulary trees, English, Mandarin, French, and a bit of Spanish. Her dad passed by, exhausted from cleaning 2 floors back to back. "You studying again?" he asked with a mixture of love and guilt. She smiled, trying to stay ahead. He paused, then sat beside her. You don't have to prove anything to me." She looked at him, eyes calm and determined. "I'm not proving it to you. I'm proving it to them. They just don't know it yet." What hurt the most wasn't being ignored. Maya was used to that. What stung was the way people made snap decisions about her. One of the younger analysts, Tyler, once saw her reading a book on international business law during a break. "Damn," he laughed. "You doing your dad homework or something?" Maya didn't flinch. She closed the book and looked him in the eye. "Nah, I'm studying for the job you'll probably still be applying for in 5 years." He blinked, smirked, and walked away, but not before glancing at the title again. Later that day, he Googled it. Meanwhile, Maya's father, Thomas, continued to blend into the walls like he always had. His mop was his armor, his silence his survival tactic. He'd seen what happened to black men who talked too much in white-collar spaces. He wasn't going to risk his job. Not with a daughter so close to something greater. He wiped down glass doors while hearing executives make comments they didn't realize were overheard. "We need someone more polished for the investor meeting," someone said one day. Another voice replied, "God forbid we embarrass ourselves with an accent. Let's stick to the translator." Paid top dollar for her. They laughed. Thomas didn't. He just wrung his mop a little harder and turned away. Maya, however, wasn't built to stay invisible forever. She kept noticing things. In an elevator, she once heard 2 assistants struggling to pronounce a phrase from the investor's letter. Without thinking, she softly corrected them before the doors opened. They looked at her like she'd grown two heads. How do you know Mandarin? One asked with a half laugh. Maya shrugged. I read. They didn't thank her, but she remembered something her mother used to say long before cancer took her. You don't need permission to be extraordinary. That echoed in her bones every time someone looked down on her, every time her father came home aching from a shift, every time someone dismissed her presence like she wasn't even there. In the shadows of power, brilliance often blooms quietly, waiting, watching, and learning. And while Lexford and Hayes prided itself on innovation and forward thinking, they were about to learn that true genius doesn't always wear a tailored suit or come from a six-figure consultant. Sometimes it walks in worn sneakers, carries a backpack patched with duct tape, and answers questions no one even thought to ask. They hadn't noticed Maya Reed, but they would, very soon. The rain tapped rhythmically against the giant floor-to-ceiling windows of the Lexford executive wing, a soft background sound that should have been calming, but wasn't. Tension buzzed in the air like static electricity. Everyone in upper management knew the stakes. Shun Tsung Tech Holdings, a global powerhouse from Beijing with investments in biotech, cybersecurity, and infrastructure, was considering a joint venture with Lexford and Hayes Global. It wasn't just big, it was historic. If it went through, it would instantly double Lexford's valuation, rescue their falling stock price, and cement CEO Andrew Lexford as a visionary in the eyes of shareholders. If it failed, it would trigger layoffs, board shakeups, and the likely quiet death of a company that had once been among Forbes' fastest growing. Andrew stood at the head of the war room, a long, sleek conference room drenched in modern lighting and tension. This isn't just another partnership, he told his top brass. This is survival. Our platform is 3/4 behind schedule. Revenues are stagnant. We need Shun Tsung more than they need us. He turned toward a whiteboard crowded with figures, names, and arrows. Every word we say, every glance, every gesture will be dissected by their team. No surprises. No stumbles. He looked around the room, eyes sharp. Elaine, how's our presentation on tech integration? Polished, translated, triple-checked. Slides ready in Mandarin and English. Tyler, investor bios memorized. I've rehearsed small talk and formal greeting customs. Bow, not handshake. Good. Andrew's gaze finally landed on a tall woman seated at the edge of the table. Natalia, you're sure about the interpreter? Natalia, the head of global affairs, nodded with calm confidence. Li Xian, she worked at the United Nations, fluent in Mandarin, Cantonese, and Shanghainese dialects. Fully briefed on our proposal. Confirmed for 8 a.m. sharp on the 17th. Andrew exhaled. Not a sigh of relief, but of calculated control. Everything was falling into place. The only thing he didn't realize was how quickly it was all about to fall apart. Meanwhile, just 12 floors below that conference room, Thomas Reed was changing the air filters in the data server room. It was a job no one really noticed, but Thomas took pride in doing it right. The quiet hum of machines was familiar to him, like the sound of a working heart. He moved methodically, wiping dust, adjusting knobs, his knees aching from years of labor. On his phone in his back pocket, Maya had sent him a voice note. I finished translating that article on supply chain structures from Chinese to English. Want to hear it later? He smiled. That girl, he whispered aloud, always 10 steps ahead. Upstairs, the marketing department was scrambling to produce bilingual promotional packets for the investors' visit. A few of them were privately nervous. None of them actually spoke Mandarin. They relied on apps, software, and trust in Natalia's high-priced interpreter. Maya, who was helping her father polish the glass in the same hallway, overheard a conversation between two interns. Dude, what if something goes wrong with the translator? Relax. That lady charges $700 an hour. She's a machine. I hope so. Because if we screw this up, I heard Lexford is out. Like for good. Maya lingered near the vending machine, sipping from a bottle of water, her ears tuned to every word. She knew that kind of pressure could crush people. She also knew that over-reliance on a single point of failure, like one translator, was a gamble most people didn't realize they were making until it was too late. Later that afternoon, while waiting for her dad near the loading dock, Maya sat on a folding chair beside a rusted utility cart, flipping through a Chinese language trade magazine she found online. Her phone buzzed, a YouTube notification for a business ethics lecture in Mandarin. She tapped it, slipped in her earbuds, and lost herself in a world of technical vocabulary and investor lingo. Her dad arrived to see her repeating phrases under her breath like she was practicing a spell. He chuckled. "You speak to spirits now?" She smirked. "Only billionaires." Back on the executive floor, Andrew was rehearsing every angle of the presentation. His assistant, nervous but efficient, followed him with a clipboard. Should we greet them with their native titles or stick to formal English? Both, Andrew replied. We show respect, but we control the conversation. And what about questions we can't answer? There won't be any. He adjusted his cufflinks. We're playing offense, not defense. In a different corner of the building, Tyler sat with two junior analysts trying to rehearse polite phrases. What's the word for opportunity again? Hui. Maya murmured from behind the vending machine. They turned, startled. What? Tyler asked. She looked up from her notebook. You asked what the word was. Tyler narrowed his eyes. You're the janitor's daughter, right? Maya nodded calmly. Yes. He half smiled, half scoffed. You study this stuff for fun? She shrugged. Opportunity is never just a word. He didn't respond, just walked away unnerved. Back in his small basement locker, Thomas unrolled his mat and sat beside his metal lunchbox. Maya handed him a thermos and sat beside him. Dad, she said quietly, what would you do if someone like me saved your company? He smiled, puzzled. Someone like you? Someone they don't see coming. He reached over and squeezed her shoulder gently. I'd say it's about time they opened their eyes. The 17th was approaching fast. Everyone upstairs was preparing to host giants. What they didn't know, what they never imagined, was that the real power wasn't sitting around the table. She was quietly listening, quietly watching, and soon, very soon, she'd be speaking. Before Thomas Reed was a janitor, he was a teacher, a good one. He taught literature at a small community college outside Atlanta, where his students remembered him for his thunderous voice, gentle eyes, and the way he made Shakespeare feel like street poetry. He wasn't rich, but back then he had dreams. He wanted to write a book, travel, maybe start a tutoring center for kids who looked like him, kids who didn't see their reflections in textbooks. And then Maya was born. She came early, small and fragile, with a cry that could split the sky. Her mother, Danielle, nearly didn't make it, but she held on. And Thomas, standing in that hospital room with his newborn in one hand and his wife's tired fingers in the other, made a silent vow. Whatever happens, I will give this child everything. For a few years, they were okay. Danielle worked part-time at a nonprofit. Thomas juggled teaching and freelance writing. They weren't wealthy, but they had love. Books filled the living room. Classical music floated through their apartment. And Maya, curious, wide-eyed, always asking questions, absorbed it all like sunlight. Her parents nurtured her brilliance without pressure. She learned to read early, built puzzles backwards just to challenge herself, and once recited a page of To Kill a Mockingbird after hearing it only once. But when Maya turned 9, Danielle got sick. It started as fatigue, then chest pains, then hospital visits. By the time they had a diagnosis, aggressive breast cancer, it was already stage 4. The treatment was expensive, the insurance limited. Thomas worked double shifts, sold the car, canceled Maya's piano lessons, and drained every savings account they had. He took a custodial job at night to pay for chemotherapy, then another on weekends cleaning warehouses. He stopped teaching, stopped writing. He gave up everything willingly, silently. Danielle passed away the week before Maya's 10th birthday. She left behind a box of letters for her daughter and a husband who never really stopped grieving. But Thomas didn't crumble. He couldn't afford to. There was a girl now, staring up at him with his eyes, and her mother's heart, and she needed to be raised, protected, armed for a world that wouldn't always be fair. He moved them into a smaller apartment and took a janitorial job at Lexford Tower, a corporate monolith where people wore suits that cost more than his monthly rent. He scrubbed toilets, buffed floors, cleaned after holiday parties where no one remembered his name. But it paid just enough. And every night, without fail, he came home to Maya with warm food and a new book from the donation bin at the library. He told her stories of places she'd one day go. "You're going to change the world," he'd say, brushing her hair back, "and no one will see you coming." Maya never forgot. By the time she was 14, she understood exactly how much her father had given up. She saw it in his hands, once soft and strong from turning pages, now cracked and dry from bleach. She saw it in his eyes, no longer filled with the fire of ambition, but with the steady glow of duty. She heard it in his voice, quieter now, more cautious. He didn't talk about dreams anymore. He talked about bills, safety, groceries. So Maya made a silent vow of her own. If he gave everything for me, then I owe him everything back. She studied relentlessly. She turned the library into her second home, the internet into her classroom. When her friends joked about boys or social media drama, Maya was decoding Mandarin idioms or watching interviews with international CEOs. When her teachers asked what she wanted to be, she smiled and said, "Everything." They laughed, but her father didn't. He nodded and said, "Then be it, baby girl. Be it all." He never complained when she asked to tag along to his night shifts. He knew she wasn't there out of curiosity, she was there to witness. She saw how some people walked past him like he was furniture, how others left messes without apology, how he was spoken to with clipped words or forced smiles. She saw the dignity he carried even when dignity wasn't offered. And slowly, something inside her hardened, not into bitterness but into steel. She didn't want revenge. She wanted recognition, not just for her, but for her father, for all the invisible people who carried the weight of others' success. One night, around 2 a.m., Maya sat at the kitchen table, her face illuminated by the blue light of her phone. She was practicing pronunciation drills, softly repeating phrases in Mandarin. Thomas walked out half asleep and watched her for a moment. "Why don't you rest?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Because the world doesn't rest for people like us." He sat beside her, rubbing his knees. "You know, I don't need you to carry all this." She finally looked at him, eyes fierce. "You carried it for me. I'm just passing it forward." He went quiet. Then he chuckled softly, shook his head, and kissed her forehead. "You're your mother's daughter." "No," she said. "I'm your daughter." The night before the big investor meeting, Thomas was asked to stay late to polish the executive wing. As always, he brought Maya along. She worked on her notes while he scrubbed the floors. She had already memorized the names of the Shinsung executives, their business divisions, their portfolio history. She even knew which dialect the group's leader preferred, a regional variant rarely taught in Western schools. She practiced it silently, rehearsing phrases under her breath while her father wiped smudges off the glass wall bearing the company's motto, innovation, power, legacy. When they left that night, walking side by side in silence, Thomas reached over and held her hand. "You nervous?" he asked. "Not yet," she said. He looked at her, the daughter he had raised in shadows and struggle, the daughter who now stood taller than he did mentally and morally. And for the first time in a long time, Thomas didn't feel tired. He felt proud. He didn't know exactly what she was preparing for. But deep down, he knew something was coming. And the world? The world had no idea. The morning of the deal arrived like a storm disguised as sunlight. Everything about Lexford Tower looked flawless on the surface. The lobby gleamed, the floral arrangements in the executive wing had been replaced with imported orchids, and the company's flag stood beside the American and Chinese ones, stitched with gold trim. A media crew had been prepped in case the deal closed early, and even the building's scent had been curated. Diffusers releasing a citrus cedar blend meant to impress and energize. But beneath the surface, anxiety churned like an underground fire. CEO Andrew Lexford arrived an hour earlier than scheduled, dressed in a custom navy suit, every strand of hair in place. He didn't smile. Any word from Natalia? He asked his assistant. Not yet, sir. And the translator? Her flight landed last night. She should be en route. Andrew exhaled slowly, masking the tightness in his chest. Call her. Confirm. Natalia didn't answer. In the marketing bullpen, Tyler was fixing the alignment of one last-minute slide. Who the hell uses a hyphen in a Chinese tech slogan? He muttered. Maybe. Chinese people, another assistant offered. No time for jokes. Tyler snapped. Everyone was on edge. Meanwhile, in the maintenance closet down by the freight elevator, Thomas was tying his boots. He'd been called in for early morning prep. The request was vague. Make sure the floors reflect money. Maya sat nearby, a paperback in her lap, but she wasn't reading. She was listening to every voice, every footstep, every sign of stress filtering down from upstairs. Thomas looked at her. Sure you want to be here today? She nodded, more sure than ever. Back upstairs, panic was starting to show in the cracks. Natalia finally called in, breathless and frantic. Her voice came through the speaker like a punch to the gut. I was in a car accident. Minor. I'm okay, but the interpreter isn't coming. She canceled. Something about a family emergency in Beijing. I'm sorry. I tried everything. Andrew's face went blank. Then cold. You're joking. I wouldn't joke, sir. I've tried every contact I have. No one is available. Not on this short notice. The silence in the room was thunderous. Elaine, the COO, leaned forward. Should we postpone? Andrew's jaw clenched. We can't. They're already on their way up. Tyler broke in. What about Google Translate or subtitles? They're not watching a video, Tyler. Andrew snapped. This is a live negotiation. Cultural nuance, body language, subtle meanings. A mistranslated phrase could offend them. Someone suggested using one of the company's bilingual clients via Zoom. Another offered to step in with basic phrases. Nothing felt safe. Nothing felt good enough. And then came the worst sound of all, the elevator ding. They were here. The Shun-Tsung delegation stepped out with elegance and precision. 5 individuals, each dressed in tailored gray suits, walked in sync like a practiced ensemble. Their lead, Mr. Zhou, was tall, graceful, and unreadable. His eyes scanned the room, instantly absorbing everything. The absence of a translator was immediately obvious. Andrew stepped forward with a firm, practiced smile. Welcome. It's an honor. Mr. Zhou nodded, replied in Mandarin. Andrew hesitated, then tried to repeat the greeting he'd rehearsed. It came out wrong, slightly off, a syllable misplaced, a tone flattened. Zhou blinked. His assistant whispered something in his ear. He didn't smile. The meeting began and crumbled fast. Andrew fumbled through the opening slide deck, trying to describe Lexford's vision using simple English. Mr. Zhou asked a question in Mandarin. No one answered. He asked again more slowly. Andrew looked helplessly at the COO. Tyler whispered, just nod. Pretend to understand. Move the meeting along. It was a disaster. One of the Chinese executives leaned back, arms folded. The tone in the room dropped 10 degrees. One muttered something that sounded dismissive. Maya, standing in the hallway now unnoticed, understood it perfectly. They didn't even prepare a proper liaison. What an insult. She stepped back, out of sight, her heartbeat thudding in her ears. She glanced down at her hands, shaking slightly. This was it. The moment she didn't know she'd been waiting for her whole life. Thomas appeared beside her, wiping sweat from his brow. It's falling apart, he muttered. They're blowing it. She looked at him. Her rock, her father, the man who gave everything so she could be ready for this very second. Her mouth opened before her brain fully caught up. I have to go in. He turned to her. Go in where? That room. He blinked. Baby, this isn't school. These people don't play. I know. And if they laugh you out of there, they won't. He stared at her, searching for fear in her eyes. There wasn't any. Just focus. Just fire. After a long pause, he whispered, then go. Back inside, Andrew was mid-sentence when the door creaked open. Heads turned. In walked Maya. No suit, no ID badge, just a teenage girl in jeans, a simple shirt, and a backpack slung over one shoulder. The room fell into confused silence. Andrew's eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me, this is a private meeting. I can translate," she said clearly. The sentence echoed like a gunshot. Everyone froze. Joe leaned forward slightly. He asked. Without hesitation, Maya replied. Joe blinked. His lips parted slightly, in surprise. Tyler whispered, "What did she just say?" She said, "I'm the janitor's daughter, but I also speak your language." Andrew's jaw clenched. "Maya, this isn't Mr. Lexford." Joe interrupted in English. Let her continue. And so the janitor's daughter stepped forward, past the marble conference table, past the suits, past the billion-dollar egos, and took her place between two worlds. She didn't come to be polite. She came to change everything. The room was frozen. No one dared breathe. Maya stood at the head of the conference table, opposite Andrew Lexford, flanked by powerful executives and foreign investors who were moments away from walking out. For a full second, no one said a word. Maya's hands were steady, her eyes sharp. She looked directly at Mr. Zhou, the lead Chinese investor who had just asked in perfect Mandarin who she was. She'd answered just as smoothly. "I'm the janitor's daughter, but I also speak your language." That one line, simple, unshaken, shattered every assumption in the room. One of the younger investors leaned forward, intrigued. Another raised an eyebrow, almost amused. But Joe? Joe didn't smile. He studied her like a chess master, analyzing an unexpected move. Lexford's face was turning red, equal parts anger, disbelief, and desperation. "This isn't protocol," he said tightly. "You can't just barge in here. She's already done more than your team," Joe said calmly, still watching Maya. Then, switching back to Mandarin, he asked her, "What is your role here exactly? You don't seem like part of the executive team." Maya replied without blinking, "No, sir. My father cleans this building. But I've been listening, learning, and I understand the value you bring and the disrespect you've just been shown." The room gasped silently. Joe's lips twitched, not a smile, but something closer to admiration. Andrew tried to interrupt again, but this time Elaine, the COO, put a hand on his arm. "Let her speak," she whispered. Maya turned to the projection screen, still showing the Lexford Company pitch in English, a presentation rendered meaningless without proper cultural context. She picked up the remote clicker and navigated 2 slides forward. Then, in fluent Mandarin, she began, "This is where the proposal falls apart. The numbers are accurate, but the language is cold. It does not reflect partnership, it reflects control. Shun Song doesn't want to be absorbed. You want respect. You want collaboration. You want legacy. This presentation doesn't offer that. But we can." Zhou leaned back, eyes narrowing in thought. He spoke again, slower, more carefully this time. "And why should we believe you? You're not a part of this company." Maya glanced at Andrew, then back to Zhou. "Because I have nothing to gain by lying. I've watched this place from the ground up, literally. I've seen how they run. I've heard your concerns. I know why your team hesitated, and I know how to fix it." She tapped the clicker and revealed a revised version of the slide. Rewritten in Mandarin, with culturally respectful phrasing, clear equity language, and subtle tonal adjustments that could only have been made by someone who understood the culture, not just the words. The Chinese investors murmured among themselves, heads nodding slightly. Zhou looked around the table, then gave a short nod. "Continue." For the next 15 minutes, Maya translated the entire presentation flawlessly, not just the literal words, but the intent. She added respectful proverbs at key transitions, contextualized business values, explained Western idioms that didn't carry over, and even corrected a few translation errors from the original interpreter's file. The executives in the room, Tyler, Elaine, Andrew, sat in stunned silence. Tyler looked at Elaine and whispered, "She's better than the professional interpreter." "She's better than all of us," Elaine whispered back. Zhou was now fully engaged. He asked a direct question about equity shares. Maya translated. Andrew answered. She translated back, not just accurately but elegantly preserving intent, tone, and confidence. And slowly, something shifted. The tension that had thickened the air when the investors first walked in, it began to lift. The room leaned in. Eyes once cold were now curious. Arms once folded were now resting, open, interested. Finally, Joe turned to Maya and spoke in English. You learned our language, why? Maya hesitated. Then she said softly, because I watched my father work harder than anyone in this building and no one saw him. I promised myself I would never be invisible. So I taught myself the languages that power moves are made in. I wanted to be ready for moments just like this. Joe stared at her, then slowly, deliberately nodded. I have one more question, he said. Yes, sir. What is your name? She stood tall, shoulders back. Maya Reed. The investors conferred quietly, and then Mr. Joe stood. He turned to Andrew. We will stay, he said, and continue the negotiations, but only if she remains in the room. Andrew, stunned and red-faced, could only nod. Of course. Maya returned to the back corner of the room, standing quietly, not out of deference, but because she knew now. Her presence had already reshaped the outcome. Down the hall, Thomas stood in the shadow of the corridor, a mop still in his hands, eyes wide, heart in his throat. He had seen it, heard it, all of it. His daughter, the child he raised on sacrifice and silence, had just saved a multi-million-dollar deal. With nothing but brilliance, with nothing but truth, with everything he had poured into her. The meeting ended with quiet murmurs and nods, not because it failed, but because it worked. The kind of quiet that follows after something profound, something no one saw coming, but everyone would remember. The Shen Song delegation rose from their seats, one by one. Mr. Zhou turned toward Andrew Lexford with the cool confidence of a man who'd been testing him the entire time. We will move forward, he said plainly. But your company's strength lies in more than your numbers. You have brilliance hidden in places you didn't even bother to look. Andrew managed a polite smile, but everyone saw it, the barely concealed bruising to his ego. He extended his hand for a shake. Zhou shook it briefly, but then his eyes shifted past Andrew, scanning the room until they landed on Maya, who stood respectfully at the back, shoulders relaxed, hands folded in front of her. Zhou stepped toward her, his team parting like water to make room. He stopped only a foot away. Then he bowed his head, not low, but enough to mean something. In China, he said, we honor scholars, and we do not forget voices that carry wisdom. Maya bowed slightly in return. Thank you, sir. I hope we meet again, perhaps at a different table, with your name on the door. The investors turned and began walking toward the exit, more impressed by the girl in jeans than anyone in the room wearing a tailored suit. Silence hung like a suspended breath. Andrew turned toward Maya slowly, his expression unreadable. Behind him, Tyler and Elaine were already whispering. The moment demanded something, an acknowledgement, a response, anything. Finally, Andrew spoke. You blindsided me, he said flatly, hijacked a boardroom, ignored every boundary, and made us all look like amateurs. Maya looked at him calmly, her voice steady. I saved your deal. You did. He nodded once. You absolutely did. Another pause. I don't know whether to fire your father or hire you. Everyone stiffened. Then Elaine stepped forward. You'd be a fool to do either. Tyler chimed in. She knew more about the investors than we did. She knew more than the cultural consultant. And she made us look competent. Honestly, Lexford, she made you look good. Andrew exhaled sharply through his nose. He wasn't used to being corrected. But he wasn't a complete fool either. She doesn't even have a college degree. She has something better, Elaine said. Presence, brilliance, and loyalty. Maya remained silent. She didn't need to argue. Her work had already spoken loud enough for the whole city to hear. At that moment, the conference room door opened again, and Thomas walked in. Still in his custodial uniform, hands dusted with floor polish, face lined with years of early mornings and quiet dignity. He stood awkwardly at the threshold, unsure if he was even allowed in. Joe, halfway down the hallway, saw him, stopped, walked back. He approached Thomas and gave him a respectful nod. Your daughter is remarkable. Thomas blinked. She gets it from her mother? No, Joe said. She gets it from both. And with that, the investor exited the building, leaving behind a stunned company and a legacy that had just changed hands. Inside the boardroom, Andrew faced Thomas now, the man he'd seen cleaning his floors for 10 years, but had never seen. I guess congratulations are in order. Andrew said, awkwardly, your daughter saved the company. Thomas didn't gloat. He simply nodded. She's been ready. Andrew hesitated. What's she planning to do after high school? Maya answered for herself. Business. International relations. Maybe law school. Elaine cut in. She could intern here. Paid. Paid. Very well, added Tyler. Andrew rubbed his chin. You want a job here, Maya? She looked around the room. At the expensive furniture, the polished glass, the people who had once looked right through her. Then she looked at her father. I want options. He smiled, proud, quiet, like always. And for the first time in her life, she realized that she had them. Real options, doors that would open now, not just because of what she'd done, but because the world had been forced to watch her do it. And when people witness brilliance, they can't unsee it. Later that day, in the basement locker room, Maya and Thomas sat side by side on a wooden bench. He was still in uniform. She was still in jeans. But everything had changed. I didn't mean to make trouble, she said quietly. You didn't, he replied. You made history. They sat in silence a while longer. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out something worn and folded, a brochure, a college scholarship flyer from a foundation that supported underrepresented youth in tech and diplomacy. He had picked it up months ago from a community bulletin board, but never mentioned it. I was going to give you this after graduation, he said, but now seems right. She took it, read it silently, then looked at him. You still think I can change the world? He laughed softly. You already did. Change doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It shows up quietly, in glances, in whispers, in the way people begin to walk a little differently when they pass you in the hallway. And that week, something shifted inside Lexford and Hayes. People who once barely nodded at Maya now stepped aside to let her through. A few even said good morning, some with genuine respect, others with forced politeness. But it didn't matter. For the first time, they saw her. Tyler, the overconfident analyst who once joked about her being just the janitor's daughter, now referred to her as the unofficial liaison that saved the Shen deal. Elaine Carrington, the COO, asked her to sit in on a postmortem meeting about investor relations. And HR, that same department that had once filed her name under visitor, now wanted to discuss opportunities in fast-track programs. Maya wasn't fooled. She knew how the world worked. Respect was rarely given, it was earned through fire, and even then, sometimes only temporarily. But that didn't bother her. What mattered was that she was no longer invisible. In a quiet corner of the 9th floor, the marketing team was meeting to revise their cultural outreach plan, a printed version of Maya's revised slide. The one that corrected the Mandarin phrasing was pinned to the whiteboard. Who wrote this again? One of the interns asked. The janitor's kid, said another, then corrected himself. Actually, Maya Reed. Meanwhile, in the corner office, Andrew Lexford stood at the window with his arms crossed, staring out at the skyline of the city his father once helped build. His jaw was tight, his mind unsettled. Elaine entered without knocking. You lost control of the room, she said plainly. Andrew didn't turn. I didn't lose control. I delegated. You panicked. She didn't. He turned to her slowly. She was out of line, unqualified, undocumented, unauthorized. She was perfect, Elaine replied. Andrew sat down, quiet for a moment. I've worked for 20 years to build this company, he said finally, and I nearly lost the biggest deal of my career because we overlooked a teenager. Elaine gave a short nod. Then maybe it's time we stop overlooking. Maya didn't expect anything to come easy. She had grown up watching her father work jobs where no one noticed if he was excellent, only if he made a mistake. So, when Lexford's assistant emailed her an offer for a paid internship with mentorship and leadership development, she didn't jump at it. She asked for terms. She requested that the program include underrepresented youth from low-income backgrounds, that interns be allowed to shadow executives and support staff, that janitorial staff receive bilingual training for advancement if desired. It was bold, too bold, some whispered, but not to Elaine. When she read the email, she smiled. She's not applying for the system, Elaine said to Andrew. She's rewriting it. And surprisingly, Andrew agreed. We'll approve her terms, he said quietly. And one more thing. What? Give her a badge. A real one, with her name on it. Down in the service hallway, Thomas was finishing his shift when he saw it. There, on the bulletin board outside the HR office, was a company-wide newsletter. At the top, in bold black font, Employee Spotlight, Maya Reed, cultural consultant and future leader beneath it, a candid photo of Maya, smiling softly, standing between Joe and Andrew after the deal was signed. Thomas didn't say a word. He just stared at it, and for the first time in 15 years, he let himself cry. The ripple didn't stop at Lexford Tower. A week later, Maya received a call from a local journalist. A staffer at Shinsong had quietly tipped them off. I heard what you did in that room, the reporter said. People need to hear this story. Maya hesitated. She didn't want pity or praise, but she did want light to fall on the shadows she'd grown up in, to show that brilliance doesn't need pedigree, just opportunity. She agreed, on one condition. The story would be titled, The Janitor's Daughter Who Spoke the Language No One Expected. The article went viral within a day. Students from underserved schools sent messages of thanks. Language learning apps offered her free premium subscriptions. A professor from Howard University emailed to ask if she'd guest speak on power dynamics in modern corporate translation. But the message that struck hardest came handwritten in a simple envelope slipped into her backpack at school. Inside, a letter from a girl named Alina in Detroit. It read, I saw what you did. I'm the daughter of a school bus driver. I thought I'd always be behind the glass. But now maybe I'll speak too. Maya kept that letter in her wallet. As summer approached, Maya sat with her father one evening on the roof of their apartment building. The skyline sparkled, but it wasn't intimidating anymore. It was familiar now, achievable. I got accepted to the Youth Diplomat Summer Program, she said. Thomas grinned. That's Ivy League level. I know. And you're still taking that internship? For now, she said. I've got things to learn and a system to watch from the inside. He nodded. Don't forget who you are when you walk into those rooms. She looked at him. I am because of who you are. He smiled, pride soaking into every wrinkle on his face. You're more than my daughter now. You're a voice. Maya leaned back and whispered to the sky, then I'm going to speak louder. And she would. 3 weeks later, the Lexford Tower elevator chimed, open on the 42nd floor, the executive floor. Maya stood alone inside, holding a leather folder, wearing navy blue blouse, slacks, and her freshly issued staff badge. It gleamed under the light. Maya, read strategic liaison, intern access level. Executive plus multilingual services, she stepped out into the marble hallway, where once she had stood behind vending machines and glass walls, unseen. Now, every step echoed with clarity and purpose. People greeted her by name. Morning, Maya. Welcome back. Big meeting today? She smiled politely, but didn't linger. She walked with the quiet grace of someone who'd already proven herself in a room full of sharks and taught them how to listen. She passed the glass conference room where it all happened, the place where she rewrote a deal and a power dynamic. It was empty now, sunlight slashing across the table like golden lines on a battlefield no one remembered to clean. But Maya remembered. She always would. On her way to the elevator, she noticed someone new mopping the lobby floor. A young man, maybe 17, earbuds in, hoodie up, invisible to everyone rushing past him. She stopped, walked over, and waited. He noticed her shoes. looked up confused. Maya smiled. First week? He nodded slowly. You work up there? She nodded. Yeah. Doing what? She thought about it for a second, then said, I speak. He blinked. Huh. I speak when they least expect it, and when it matters most. He tilted his head, unsure what that meant, but he smiled anyway. Cool. She handed him the sandwich from her bag. You're gonna need this. Trust me. Then she walked away. Not because she had to be somewhere, but because she had somewhere to go. She wasn't a bystander anymore. She was the story. That same day, in a small office overlooking the city, Thomas Reed was polishing a window frame. His movements were slower now, more deliberate, not because he was tired, but because for the first time in years he was no longer hurrying to survive. He looked out at the skyline, not with envy, but with satisfaction. Somewhere up there, his daughter was doing things that would echo in boardrooms for years. A familiar voice broke his thoughts. Mr. Reed? He turned. It was Andrew Lexford. Yes, sir. I wanted to thank you. Again. Thomas wiped his hands. I'm just the janitor. Andrew paused, then said, That's what I used to think, too. He extended his hand, the kind of gesture people like him rarely gave to men in overalls. Thomas looked at it, then shook it, not because he needed validation, but because his daughter had already rewritten what respect looked like. Weeks later, Maya stood at a podium at a youth leadership summit. Her speech was short, deliberate, every sentence sharpened by experience. They told me I didn't belong in a room, but I learned their language. They told me I wasn't qualified, but I rewrote the rules. They told me to wait my turn, but I made my moment. I'm the janitor's daughter, and I am not waiting for permission to be powerful. Thunderous applause filled the room. Among the audience sat her father, dressed in his best church suit, hands folded in his lap, eyes wet. The moment she stepped down, Maya handed him the program booklet, signed in pen for Dad, the one who gave me the words before I had a voice. That night, long after the noise had faded, Maya sat by the window in her bedroom, looking at the stars. She whispered, I'm not done. Because she wasn't. This was just the beginning. Months later, Lexford Tower felt different. It wasn't just the new paint in the lobby or the diversity poster campaigns. It was the people, the tone, the doors that now stayed open instead of slamming shut behind glass and privilege. Maya had become more than an intern. She was now a symbol. After her story went viral, Lexford's executive board approved the creation of a community intelligence fellowship designed to recruit bright, underprivileged youth from custodial, maintenance, and service worker families, those who were so often ignored despite walking the same hallways. Maya didn't just endorse the program, she designed it. She brought in a team of advisors, many of them people her father knew from old jobs. She sat with translators, HR officers, and high school counselors. She asked janitors for insight. She handed out applications in break rooms. By the second month, over 700 applications had been received. She began mentoring. One girl named Amira, whose mother worked the night shift laundry at a downtown hotel, was fluent in Arabic, coding, and math, but had never once been asked what she dreamed of becoming. Until Maya called her. And that's how a janitor's daughter became the door. Not the key, the door itself, so others could walk through. It was Maya's last day as an intern before heading to Washington, D.C., where she'd been selected as the youngest advisor for a youth diplomacy initiative. She packed her things in a plain gray bag, no designer labels, no logo flex. Just purpose. Before leaving, she took one last elevator ride, but this time down to the sub-basement floor where her father still kept his cleaning locker. She found him there, folding his coveralls. Thought you were already gone, he said with a smile. I wanted one more walk. He chuckled. Even you can't clean these halls better than me. They walked together through the back corridors just like old times, a route they'd taken when she was 11, holding a flashlight and reading economics books aloud as he worked. At the freight elevator, she stopped. I'm scared, she said softly. Thomas looked at her. Of what? That I won't be able to keep this up. That maybe I was only heard because the moment was loud. He took a breath, then touched her shoulder. No, Maya. They heard you, because you spoke truth with no permission, and now they can't unhear you. She leaned into him. Promise me something? Anything. Don't retire yet. Not until I make enough to give you your second chapter. He nodded, fighting tears. You already gave me everything. Then he opened the elevator door, just like he had years ago. This time, she stepped in alone. As it closed behind her, Maya whispered aloud, "One day, I'm gonna own a building like this." And she meant it, because now the world was listening. And she had only just begun speaking. The sun was just starting to rise over the city, casting a soft golden hue on the Lexford Tower windows. On the rooftop of a modest apartment building across town, Maya stood barefoot, a mug of tea in her hand, looking at the skyline. Today was her final day at Lexford, at least for now. Tomorrow, she boarded a flight to Washington, D.C., having been offered a rare position with the U.S. Youth Diplomacy Council, a seat earned not through privilege or connection, but through proof. She hadn't waited to be invited into the room. She had become the room. Behind her, Thomas stepped outside, wiping his hands with a rag after fixing the kitchen sink. Can't sleep either? He asked. Maya smiled. Did I ever really? He chuckled, walking beside her. You ready? No, but I'm going anyway. They stood in silence for a moment, side by side, two silhouettes in the rising light, father and daughter. The janitor and the girl who changed the system. You remember the day you first brought me into the building? She asked. Course I do. You were 11. You asked why the CEO had a whole floor when some workers didn't even get windows. I thought it wasn't fair. It wasn't. She turned to him. But now, I don't want just windows. I want blueprints. He nodded slowly. You'll have them. But remember, owning the building doesn't matter if you forget how to open the door for others. She looked at him, tears threatening. I won't forget. Then, from her pocket, she pulled out a simple black card, a badge from Lexford. But this one was different. It had her father's name on it. Thomas Reed, Senior Facility Consultant Access Level, all floors. He blinked. What is this? Your promotion, she said. I may be leaving, but I told them, if you want brilliance upstairs, you'd better start honoring it downstairs. He took it in his hands. And for a moment, all the years of scrubbing floors, invisible labor, missed birthdays, early mornings, and long nights, all of it felt seen. I don't need this, he whispered. You earned it anyway. They embraced, and in that embrace lived every sacrifice that built her wings. That evening at Lexford Tower, the elevator opened on the executive floor. People turned as Maya stepped out. Dressed simply. No designer suit. No need. She walked with calm certainty. She wasn't here for a meeting. She was here to say goodbye. At the front desk, a young receptionist said, You're Maya, right? I am. The girl grinned. Everyone here talks about you like you're a legend. Maya shrugged. I'm just getting started. Then from behind, a janitor pushing a cart passed by, young, tired, unnoticed, until Maya stopped, turned, and handed him her badge. You're going to want to hold on to that, she said. It opens every door. He looked at her, confused, but something in her eyes told him to believe it. Then, Maya walked to the elevator. One last ride. As the doors closed, she looked up at the security camera and smiled. Not a goodbye smile. You'll see me again smile. And then the elevator descended, taking with it not just a girl who changed a deal, but a woman who changed everything.